As you know, I'm in my 60s, and the impact on my lifetime will be less than it will be on yours. And, we're starting to see things change in the fire world much more rapidly than we thought. California area burn is increasing at a factor of 8 times since the 70s. We didn't expect that. Our fire seasons are getting longer. California is basically year-round. Even Alberta is not far off from year-round. Our fire season officially starts March 1st. It used to be April 1st. But we've had major fires every month of the year in Alberta in the last 20 to 30 years. So this is going to continue. Also, the Arctic, we're seeing fires far north of the Arctic Circle, on the Arctic coast in Siberia. We expect a lot more fire in the future, a lot more smoke.
Fires burning through the night. It's happened in the past, but we're seeing it more and more, and it will become more commonplace in the future. We're going to see fires that burn faster in the future. And looking forward, I expect to see more fire in the landscape and even more intensity in these fires, though we'll start to see some parts of Canada where the fires mean the forest will not regenerate just because fire is getting too frequent. And what replaces it? Grassland, shrubland, something that can survive with fire every year. So that's where we're heading. But from the societal impact side of things, we are going to see, unfortunately, more impacts from wildfire as fires spread into communities, or their smoke affects people even if they're 1,000 kilometers away.
Certainly that kind of perspective that I think has really dominated our landscapes for the last 100 to 150 years after colonization and European settlement in Western North America. That European perspective was that fire was damaging and bad, and that it put human lives and communities at risk. And certainly there were big forest fires early on in the early 1900s that did burn down communities and cost people lives. And that really reinforced that perception, I think, about fire is bad. And it led to the policies that have really dominated for 100 years, that we need to protect lives, communities, livelihoods, including forests and rangelands from fire. And so we've had these policies and practices about trying to detect and put out fires, thinking we were doing the right thing. We were protecting all of these values that are so important to us. And of course, the unintended consequence that we had no idea we were creating, and over such large areas as well, was this shift by removing this really critical ecological process, this evolutionary force that gave us diversity in our forests and habitats and a whole bunch of biodiversity that goes along with that. By removing that agent of disturbance, we really began this cascading effect of how forests have changed.
For me, it's pretty interesting because I see fire like as two faces. So, I see fire, wildland fire, that it can be good or bad, right? So when when Indigenous people are burning or working in our landscape, fires can be a tool that helps you to live better in your environment around you. And in terms of our inherent responsibility to look after the land too, and after, our non-human relatives, the use of fire also helps them as well. And for me, that's the good fire aspect. But then, we can have bad fire too, where we're getting these large, out-of-control wildfires because we're not properly maintaining that responsibility that we have to the land. So I think for me, that's kind of how I would almost define it as, that it's, some people just see fire as fire, but to me, there's so many faces and aspects of fire. Like, even I think in one of my publications, I talk about how like in Cree, there's, I think it's 80 or something words for fire, because there's not just fire, there's all different types of fire and ways that fire acts and how you can use fire. So in Indigenous languages, I think we tend to be much more descriptive about the actual word fire. And for me, that's important because it just shows that intimate relationship with it.
Here's the thing, okay, when people show up somewhere, they bring fire with them. I mean, honestly, if you look at like ancient sort of fire histories, you will see when people show up in an environment, we bring fire, okay. But fire was here before us too, because lightning really drives our large fires in this country. And I think if you want to exterminate any member from our ecosystem, there is consequences. If I remove all the predators from our forest, watch what happens, right? If you start modifying an ecosystem like that, you're going to tip the balance. And as far as I'm concerned, fire is one of the top predators of vegetation, right? You need it there to keep everything in check. And without it, the population, or in this case, the amount of fuel to burn is just increasing and increasing. And it invites us to have other things like pests disturbing the forest or wind throw, blow down, stuff like that. It's all problematic. But if you notice the common theme, when those sorts of disturbances hit our forest, they don't eliminate the fuel. They actually make it more accessible. So over and over and over again, it's just inviting fire. It wants fire to come back. If we put a hole in that system in the place where fire belongs, it's not going to stay empty for too long. Yeah, I mean, that's what we're staring down. I can tell you that, because of the history in my family of people who've been fighting fire over decades, there is a noticeable difference. There is a noticeable difference in the way the forest looks. And if you talk to the real old timers up north, they will tell you that the forest is really hard to walk through now. They consider it to be difficult to walk, and that it's affecting how the animals are moving around in the bush too. And, low intensity, repetitive fire helps mitigate that sort of stuff. It's much, much better to do these things in chunks than to let it all go one day in a grand hurrah.
Yeah, I mean, thinking of the fire, I think how South Coteen probably applied fire in the past was always like, expectation of low intensity burns, that they would burn sort of partially the debris, but it wouldn't affect the actual forest and the canopy of the forest. And yeah, I think the one difference of the 2017 fires was that it just destroyed everything. Although I would consider it a bit of a mosaic. It's a patchwork of places that were completely destroyed and have been turned into deserts with very little growth coming back. And then areas that, where you do see a high level of growth coming back. And then some areas that were completely resistant to the fires, which was also amazing as well. But I think the way that it's impacted the community was, it was already being quite devastated between pine beetle, different stages of climate change, and then also like a colossal drive from, the government to allow for mass clear cuts for salvage. So you're having this huge effect of just the taking of trees and changing the environment completely. So that when the fires came and passed, we were sort of left with, like, if anything that South Coteen need, it's like sort of the food base. Some people consider the forest as being akin to your refrigerator. You're always able to go there and find food, and in this case it's more uncertain how animals behaved or how their habitats were affected, and there's just a level of uncertainty on whether you can find the things that you normally would in the woods. So I think that's the biggest thing, is just like the impact on certainty of being able to like go into the woods and provide your family with food.
You know, you've heard me say that boreal forest is pure to burn, okay? It survives and even thrives in a regime of semi-regular, stand-renewing, stand-replacing crown fires. And they have strategies to deal with it, whether it's serotinous cones or semi-serotinous cones that have that waxy resin. The fire is the heat that melts that resin so that the seeds can be released, or if it's aspen that suckers so the above ground tree dies, but the rootstock survives. And after the fire goes through, you get a whole bunch of little aspen saplings like hair on a dog's back. So it's used to fire, and for many reasons, for biodiversity, keeping pests, bugs at bay, disease at bay. It's a cleansing agent. It's resetting the clock, the cycle of life, whatever you want to call it. Fire is a natural component.
For me, it's all about relationship. So not only relationship with the land, that you live on, or, the nature that's around you, but also, the people around you. So, having relationships with people who are knowledgeable about fire, who you can learn from. That's, to me, like the most important. And I think too, if we all can kind of look out around us at the forest, and they, like Victor Stevenson from Australia, he calls it like reading the land, where you look around you, and as you look more detailed, you can kind of start to see things that aren't right, where it's too overgrown, or there's too much dead grass, or, the trees aren't healthy, or there's too many ticks in an area, or things like that. And from that, and looking at the landscape around you, you can then start to think of fire as a tool that you can use. So I really see that we need to really change that perspective of fire as being something so scary that we can't control, and that people need to be in fear of, to instead that yes, there are bad fires like that, but there's also really good ways that we can use fire. And I think one of the best examples for that is Indigenous peoples. When they burn, it's like a family activity. You bring your kids, the elders come, like I've burned when I was pregnant, because your smoke exposure is just so low. And if you're doing it in a very careful way and using the good fire, it's good for kids to learn that and to see fire and not be scared, and to see it as a normal process.